Hi guys, my name's Abigail Sheridan and today I'm going to be talking about Singerie. Here's a photo example of what it is. And Merriam-Webster's definition is a picture, decoration, or design in which monkeys are depicted, which stems from the French for monkey trick. The first person to depict Singerie was a Flemish engraver by the name of, which I might butcher here, but I believe Peter van der Borch in 1575, who was later followed by Jan Bruegel the Elder and the Teniers brothers, David Teniers and Abraham Teniers. The reason that these became so popular was because of the way the photos kind of mocked the high class and self-importance of the French culture and especially the art world and kind of the hoity-toityness of it. So placing these monkey and animalistic forms as the people themselves was kind of the French people laughing at themselves in a way, which is mainly the reason that it became so popular. So here's some more examples. Some of the most famous Singeries were the ones that were actively mocking the art world. So like the monkey that was the painter, and for example here the monkey that is the sculptor. But in more like high class places, you could see the monkeys being depicted in kind of like a whimsical manner in wallpaper and tapestries in people's homes. The Singerie were also used not just in paintings or tapestries, but also in furniture, which by my research I believe wasn't as particularly common. But here's some examples here of just some figurines and the back of a chair, which I think the detail on this is really beautiful. And then also in these candlesticks, I believe the candlesticks, they might be a modern interpretation. I'm not quite sure if those were actually of the era of the 18th century. So there is actually more of a modern interpretation in the 21st century by the artist Walton Ford, which you can see his work here. It's not exactly quite the same style, obviously, and the monkeys aren't exactly as exaggerated into human form, but I think the level of kind of mockery and depicting animals in a humanistic behavior is the same. So I'm just gonna quickly show a video of Walton Ford's interview, which kind of gives a little bit insight of his thought process and his way of thinking in his art.
I went to art school and got more training and went to Europe and studied Giotto and all the great Trecento painters of Italy, and those narrative styles really resonated with me, almost like comic strips. I also liked R. Crumb and graphic, all kinds of graphic. Before they were graphic novels, they were just underground comics, and I liked those as well. This sort of outrageous way of telling stories. I take traditional narrative forms, natural history painting, hunting narrative painting, and I try to change it and subvert the meaning and insert my own narrative into it, and using traditional forms to tell stories that these forms never would tell. So I think of it as like putting a computer virus in a traditional painting, or a Tourette syndrome. You know what this is? Tourette syndrome, when people blurt out crazy, they say, they swear or whatever. So my idea is that I make the painting start to tell embarrassing truths or things that it wouldn't normally tell. And I found that tradition in European painting that was not that dissimilar, using the saints and things like this, the work that I was very interested in, again, when I was young, as a child, what I pictured for myself was that I would be a natural history artist in a traditional way, in the footsteps of Audubon, but also Edward Lear. Also in France, there's Baraban. There's many fantastic painters of natural history painters. But the one thing they mostly have in common is that they use watercolor on paper and gouache as well, sometimes in ink. But the idea that the language of natural history from the time that Dürer painted the rabbit until photography takes over in the late 19th century, it's always watercolor on paper. You bring a journal kind of thing out into the field. You're hunting animals. You're describing them with notes and painting them in watercolors in a field book. And this then is brought to a print shop, and then etchings are made, and then books are published, or lithographs. It's always a paper medium. It's always watercolor on paper or prints on paper. And we all kind of respond to this work. It's surprising how many, say, hip, contemporary apartment, you'll have a 19th century natural history print on the wall. There's some connection with that moment that we want, I think, now. What those images represent for a contemporary apartment dweller in Paris or New York is a sort of connection with a world where we were still exploring, where we didn't have all the answers, where there was a wild out there. There was a wild world out there to still be explored, where it wasn't small national park with an admission fee and a long lineup of cars, and like I never saw an animal because there was just people in gift shops. This was a world, the last gasp of a world where you could get lost, and where you didn't know the answers, and where you didn't Google map yourself, and where everything was still very mysterious. And so that is a talisman from that period of time. So what I'm interested in is the darker stories behind that image. In other words, this is an image born of violence, of blood, of conquest, of a lot of difficulties that we have inherited. For millions of years, people were hunted or were hunting. And then for only a few thousand, we lived in towns and we had domestic animals and crops. And then only for a few hundred or even a few decades now, if we have any wild space left, we have to protect it. And if we have predators that used to prey upon us as a form of meat for millions of years of our history, we have to completely change our evolutionary relationship with these animals now. And how do you do that? It's like rewriting DNA that's in us from when we were apes. I don't know how we're going to get out of this jam we're in, but my work is exploring the intersection of human culture and animals, and trying to just make images out of it. I don't have answers, but I am interested in the stories.
All right, thank you guys.